Right.
Okay, everyone, please welcome Salem Almaani. He's board member here at Deep, so I'm very excited. And he has a very interesting profile. He is an HR leader from ex Google, LinkedIn, and Deloitte, also Accenture. Um, he's also a DJ. He's a very creative talent. And today he's going to talk about AI potential for HR with a framework for ideation and definitely a focus on performance management. Thank you, Salim. Take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Salem Almaani. And as Leah alluded to, in today's session, we'll be talking specifically about the potential of application of AI in human resources through a case study and an example that is rooted in performance management. And as I said, this talk is supposed to be more conversational, so please at any point interrupt, ask questions. And what I'm hoping for you to take away today is a thought process of, how can we apply AI within our sphere of influence, within our domains, and how can we think about it, especially that, and I don't know about you, but everywhere I turn now, it's AI this, AI that. So it's good for us to get grounded on how can we actually apply it in a manner that makes sense. So that being said, I just want to introduce myself, Salem Almaani. I am a board member of the Dubai Institute of People as of about a year ago. I bring 13 years of experience at Accenture, Deloitte, LinkedIn, and Google, all in the domain of HR, consulting, technology, implementations, transformation, and operations. So my domain expertise is deep knowledge in people operations or HR, depending on where you sit. My functional expertise is a lot of strategy and transformation. So anything that has to do with change, implementation, building a strategy, multi-year analysis, that's like my bread and butter. I'm also a certified AI and ML product management. So I try to keep my arsenal sharp and think about how can we bring AI into my domain. Outside of work, I am a pianist, a DJ. I have a black belt in Taekwondo, and I'm a bit of an activist. So that's me. Uh, that being said, I just want to provide a quick session overview. So the overview of this session is just, as I said, on the application of AI in human resources. And we're going to go through the process of identification to ideation and performance management. So what that means, I'm going to set the stage, share a little bit about performance management as one of the pillars of HR, think about some of the challenges and opportunities that exist in the performance management today, and then switch a bit and think about the application of AI, of how to think about bringing AI to some of our business problems, and then bringing it all together to think about how can we apply the methodology for implementing AI within one of the challenges within performance management. So, it doesn't matter if you're somebody who's experienced in performance management or not, somebody who's versed in AI or not. It's meant to be fundamental, foundational, and the takeaway there is just the way of thinking and ideation. So if you have any questions as we go through it, want me to clarify anything, please raise your hand, get off mute, and ask away. Cool. All right. So that being said, just a little bit of agenda, so know what to expect today. We're going to start with, as I alluded to, performance management overview, challenges and best practices, just laying the foundation. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use AI and the criteria behind deciding that a problem is worth solving through AI. And then we're going to bring it all together to apply an AI model in performance management. And then in the end, we're going to open it up for Q&A for any questions that we may have not answered during the session. And also, I know we have a mixed crew, so if you feel more comfortable asking in English, please do so. If you feel comfortable asking in Arabic, happy to answer that, and I'll translate as well. So please just don't hesitate. So let's start with performance management. So performance management is actually one of the central and essential parts of the universe of HR. It's one of the nodes, and it is connected to other parts of HR. But specifically, What performance management is, it is a way to evaluate the output and the execution of employees against a set of goals. Those goals can be company-wide goals, they could be team goals or individual goals. And typically, this process takes place in companies regardless of size, footprint, or industry, but in various forms. But what they all have in common is, it is a process that is typically repeated, sometimes twice a year, sometimes once a year. Some companies have invested a lot in performance management. They're leading. They're creating creative and innovative tools to measure performance, and others are very foundational. Pen and paper. Think about just bare bones performance management. And usually the way it takes place, it is managers and individual contributors who go through the process, starting with the individual contributor level and climbing all the way up to leadership. So just by maybe show of hands or anything, how many of you are familiar with performance management or have taken part of at least one cycle of performance management? I see thumbs up. Okay, cool. So 4 people, amazing. Okay, so at least we're talking about something that is common for the group here. So I'm just gonna keep moving then. So as I said, performance management tends to be a cyclical process. What does that mean? It is that it's not a one and done process. The way it starts is with planning. Planning takes place as in building the foundation for the process, going through goal setting, and goals are usually set as a collaborative effort between team members and their managers. And then those goals are being monitored or revisited through a period of time, sometimes 3 months, 6 months, a year. Some companies elect to do an always on model. Some just elect to do it once or twice a year, depending on their needs. Then after that, there's an element of reviewing where typically those goals are being reviewed against the performance. And then once those have been reviewed, then there's a usually company-wide review process where folks are given a rank, a score. They are stacked against each other, calibrated each other, and then that is then used as piece of input for rewards, things like bonuses, changes in compensation, and on the other end is performance management in terms of putting somebody on a performance plan or other elements of that nature. And what's usual about this is that because it's cyclical, there's an element of learning, there's an element of evolution. And it's supposed to empower not only the individuals, but the company to grow and evolve and adapt to the changing environment or the changing goals. That being said, that, of course, a repeated process that's evolving, that has elements and external factors, comes with challenges. So because of human nature and evolving business goals, sometimes there could be a lack of alignment between individual goals and business goals. And what that creates is a little bit of dissonance and separation between what maybe employees or managers are doing day to day versus what the business goals are for that year or that time period. Because it's a highly human process, there's bias and subjectivity, as in, there could be parts of the performance that are unknown due to maybe leaves or folks not being close to the work. There could be elements of bias that show up as folks may be of the same affinity group or have something in common with employees, and that shows up. The other part where there's some challenges is sometimes managers do not have the tools or the training to be fully equipped to carry through the performance process because it highly depends on the managers. So that shows up in gaps. There could be lack of employee buy-in, as in they're not very familiar with the process. They have some doubts and they don't understand, what are they being measured up against. And we have a couple of things that are in the tools and the data. Sometimes the process is great, the system is great, but we do not have the right tools or technology to implement it or the data to support it. So with that being said, for each challenge, we have some best practices. So I'm not going to go through the list of best practices, but the idea is that depending on where you are in the market and your investment in performance management, there have been leaders in the industry where they have solved for those problems. For example, I can tell you from my own experience when I was at Deloitte and Google, there was a lot of research that's being done to simplify the process, to make it in real time, to implement technology that is supportive of the process, and also to conduct a lot of manager and employee training to make sure that everybody is familiar with the process, can talk about it comfortably, and is able to align it with the business goals. Pause here. Any thoughts, questions, any experiences? All right. So I'll take silence as a no. So let's keep on going. So what I want to focus on here is we talked about a lot of challenges. And instead of going through a solution for each of the challenges, I want to pick one challenge, talk about it a little bit, so then we can think about how AI can solve for that challenge. So bias and subjectivity. Because it is a highly personal and human process, we have different types of examples where the bias and subjectivity show up. There's affinity bias, which means folks of the same group might have a propensity to support one another in a way that is biased. And this could be anywhere and anything from a gender group to a racial group to an ethnicity group, you name it. People like to stick to people like them or feel like they know people like them more. There's recency bias. So for example, if the process is spanning a year of performance, if somebody did really well the last month or two, there may be a propensity to evaluate them higher because they performed well at the end of the process. Proximity bias, it could be that managers, because they're close to the work of their own team members, evaluate them higher than maybe other team members that sit on different teams. Incomplete information, it could be that folks are not documenting their performance well, so that then translates to a lower rating because they don't have enough information. Rating inflation or deflation, it could be that folks are not very versed on the scaling of the rating, so people could give the highest rating because they just don't know how to apply the criteria. So all those are just examples that can show up. They can show up exclusively or collectively, but the point is that those are all rooted in a lot of human elements. And because we're human, we're imperfect, you cannot control for that process. So what that really implies or results in things like higher attrition, lower productivity, and lower engagement. So higher attrition, it could be that folks not receiving an equitable and an appropriate rating might leave the company, creating a gap in knowledge, creating open positions, which translates to dollars lost. And that could show up in anything like sales quota, unable to deliver on certain deliverables, etc. Lower productivity means because they're disengaged, they may have lower productivity resulting in lower output. And then lower engagement, it could be that also they're not being engaged in meetings, they're missing deliverables and need to be maybe put on a plan. So the reason I picked this one specifically is because one of the good things about AI is actually its lack of feelings or lack of this human element, where it shows up the same way every way, depending on how you program it based on the data you provide, and it alleviates or diminishes a lot of those human elements. So what's really interesting about this is if you think about the situation for performance management, if we have a robust structure for evaluating our employees, we have a robust way to document targets, and then those are robust, they're solved for, they're consistent across the board. Then we come to the pieces where there's a human element. We can reduce the amount of human element by implementing the appropriate AI model to then create a consistent process from beginning to end. So I'm going to pause here. I know I just said a lot before we move to the next part. Any thoughts or questions or anything that comes to mind?
Salem, can I ask something, if I'm allowed?
Yeah.
All right. So we talk about the role of AI in the overall HR process. So one thing specifically which I want to clarify or which I want to understand is on the bias which happen in terms of candidate selection. Because nowadays, if you happen to see a vacancy or a job advertisement, so a lot of people are actually applying, be it in LinkedIn or any other job sites. So as part of the selection or screening, many organizations uses the AI shortlisting process. They actually take help of AI, and many times it happens that because of the rigid algorithm or the keyword which is already set in the screening,
Yeah.
many right candidates or qualified candidates are often excluded at the series screening stage itself. And my only point is that in such kind of a situation, how do we know that the hiring team is catching hold of the right candidate? I mean, see, there are a lot of aspects when it comes to the capability or the qualification or the
Yeah.
suitability of the candidate. So the keyword will not at all the time, no, will be helpful. So how
Yeah.
do we address these kind of challenges? Because why I raised this question, because even for me, when I happen to see a good opening or a job advertisement, when I
Yeah.
apply to that, and many things, most of the things may be matching, or sometimes it is exceeding the requirement at
Yeah.
certain times.
Yeah.
But what happens is that sooner or later, within a week or something, you get an auto rejection email from the system which says, "Okay, we are not going ahead with your candidature." These kind of things, and after some time, when you go back to LinkedIn and see what kind of candidate got selected for that particular, because we know in the
Yeah.
market now we are very connected with a lot of professionals. So
Yeah.
we make note of the person who has less experience or having less kind of expertise has got into that role. So I'm literally trying to understand, is there a gap in the screening stage itself, or is it something other than that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I asked it it's too lengthy.
Yeah. So sorry. I'll try to answer this. I know it's a little bit of a divergence from the topic, so I'll spend around a minute giving you my thoughts on that topic. So yes, you're absolutely right. Right now, in the recruiting and the talent acquisition space, there is a very, very big challenge that's creating a lot of friction in how candidates are being selected and hired, but also the mechanism in which recruiters and companies are able to screen candidates. And part of it is twofold. One, it is a saturated market. So there's a lot of applicants for each position with scarce resources in terms of recruiters and companies not being able to review every single candidate and give them a fair chance. So that's a very known fact. The other part is also candidates have gotten really savvy with the use of AI and other things where they tailor their resumes sometimes to trigger keywords in the system, and sometimes they mask their experience. So all to say, it is a well-known problem. What it needs fundamentally, it's a different mechanism from both sides of the market to be able to represent the experience better, and for the hiring teams to be able to get signals in a better way that aligns with the role. So there is no clean solution right now, but there's a lot of investment in that problem. So I'm just gonna pause at that just because I want to keep us honest to time. But if this is something you want to talk about after the meeting, please add me on LinkedIn and we can talk about it. But I just want to be cautious of the time and staying on track, if that's okay with you. Of
Thank you, Salem. Much appreciated.
course. We said the challenges that are happening. One of then how this shows up is usually managers will meet up and discuss the performance of their team members. And what they try to do is come up with a ranking of their team members. And if you're a manager, you've probably been in a lot of those sessions. I can tell you from my own experience, on average, each time we spent somewhere around 20 hours as managers to go through this process. And as somebody who's participated in them, somebody who's led them, I know all sorts of biases show up. We have to invest. So think about it, how many managers show up to those sessions and what that costs. And sometimes the outcome is not complete. And so the question here is, can we use AI to automate this process to save a lot of money, save a lot of time, and then come up with a more objective ranking? So that being said, let's turn the tables a little bit and switch to the context of AI, of how can AI help? So there are three big questions when we think about the application of AI to solve any of the problems. And this context or this structure, you can really apply to any of your business problems to just think through how can you apply AI. The first one is there a business problem and is it worth solving? As in, can you identify the problem? And is the investment to solve this problem worth the ROI? And usually the ROI can be measured in hours, in time. So sometimes problems do exist, but they do not have the right return on investment. And sometimes the problem is really not a problem. It could be a symptom, right? So you need to be able to identify the problem and identify that it's worth solving. And then the second question is this a problem can be solved with a traditional model or does it need AI, right? So sometimes problems can be used, using a linear model, one-time approach, and doesn't require AI. So let's be cautious here when, folks throw AI left and right, just to pause, think about, is this a problem that AI can solve? And do we have the right, third question, is it feasible? Does it have support and maintenance? Because the thing about AI, there are two things. The first part is when laying the groundwork for AI, we need to move slow so we can go fast in the future. That means, do we have the right data? Do we have the right technology? Do we have the right model that we're building? And then do we have the maintenance and the upkeeping? Because usually AI problems or solutions start small and then they build up. And then when they reach steady state, there needs to be a certain level of maintenance to avoid problems down the line, such as data divergence. So maybe it could be that the data that you use to set up the model is no longer valid and it has evolved over time, which means you need to retrain your model. And there are a lot of other things that show up. But the point here is ask yourself those three questions to then identify whether you can use AI or not. So assuming for this structure, for the problem that I articulated in performance management, the answer is yes, right? So there is a problem, AI is the right solution for it, and there's maintenance. The way it works, usually we start small. So if you think about it, this is an illustrative example from one of the books that I reference. There are usually 5 levels of AI. So usually it starts with a rule-based automation, intelligent automation, agentic workflows, semi-autonomous agentic systems, and fully autonomous agentic systems. So what that means is, in the example what we use, we start maybe with a small subset with a very specific rule, and we say, for example, like just going back to the example, if Sarah met criteria 1, 2, 3 fully, and Leah met the criteria 3, then Sarah is above Leah, right? We just define it and then train it potentially on historical information, which we call heuristics. Then what we do is, after a little bit of training, we give it an example. We say, okay, in today's session, we had Salem go above, Sarah. So, and here's the input. How do you think of the output? We look at it, we test it. Does that align with our criteria? And if the answer is yes, then we train it. If the answer is yes, we proceed. If no, then we retrain it. And then it comes to agentic workflows, where they take a little bit of agentic comes from the word for take action. So they start taking action in isolation of like, okay, now they understand what the process is. Year after year, they learn and they're able to do this process. Then we go to the semi-autonomous and fully autonomous, where we might have a network of agents and they're able to communicate with each other. So this doesn't happen in isolation. So one agent is responsible for the performance management. One is responsible for manager training, and they talk to each other. As in, we've identified that this manager, there's a lot of misinformation that's showing in their performance management. So can we recommend a training plan for them? Then it talks to the other agent, does so. Or also it could be involved in compensation management, where the output from performance management from that agent talks to the input for compensation planning. And that is very aspirational. That is something that usually exists in networks. You've probably seen acronyms like RAG, etc., but that is like basically future state. So what I recommend is we start small, we train the model on historical data, we then expand it a little bit by little bit, start with a specific team, specific organization, specific geography, so we can see the model running. And the framework that we usually do or use is what's referred to as SPAR. So it's 4 pieces. It's sense, plan, act, and reflect. So this is a cyclical process. As we train AI agents to be more and more autonomous, they usually go through this cycle. of, think of how humans act in a situation. You get to a situation, you take a look of your surroundings, you understand what's happening, and then you create a plan. And then you create that plan, you execute that plan or you act on it. Then you look at the outcome, and then based on the outcome, you reflect of, what are the things that went right, what are the things that need improvement, and you learn, adapt, and do it all over again. I'm going to pause here before I go to the next slide. Any questions?
Pardon me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. In fact, one of my acquaintance, he been working with LinkedIn for quite long.
Mm-hmm.
And LinkedIn themselves are masters in adoption and application of all such digitization, including AI and all. But one-to-one conversation with him reveals that these are all adopted, used, everything done. But finally, decision comes from brains of the people in hierarchy, not from the systems.
Sorry, not sure I'm following what the question is.
My question is that finally what happens, all these systems are there, they remain there in the system, outcomes they deliver, but final calls are coming from the brains of the people, not the outcome of the system is applied for.
Yeah.
So then in such a scenario, what way AI or data science or digitization is contributing?
Yeah, the reason behind that is if you think about the evolution of where we are, a lot of AIs in system are still in the foundational level 1 or level 2. So the difference between traditional AI or agentic AI is that traditional AIs have a stopping point where they require human action. But as those models are evolving, you get to the agentic AI, and that means they go actually take the action, provide the input, and take the part instead of that human action that you're talking about. And that has to do with the maturity of the model, the investment in the model, and where it is in the evolution.
Fine. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Of course. So putting it all together, we've identified a situation in performance management. We've identified the opportunity. We've identified the model. So how can we put this into action? So we have the rating. If we talked about rating inflation, we talked about manager bias. Then we put that as a piece of input into the system. We have our AI agent. Let's say we are agentic AI. They take all that information. They provide us with more objective evaluations. What they do as well, they can flag inconsistent ratings across teams to create equity in the process. They can analyze historical rating behaviors of managers, and down the line, as they're evolved, try recommending training for managers, and that way there's an elevation of the skill set. And then they can also recommend calibration settings, sessions, or adjustments, which means it's a lot of time being saved, a lot of money being saved in the company, and it has down the line implications on retention, engagement, and output of employees. So I'm going to stop here. We talked about agentic AI, but I'm going to pause here, see if you have any questions of how we brought it all together. If you need me to clarify anything about, the outcome, the process, how to maybe challenge this or think about this in a different way.
Just one more question from me.
Yeah.
All the digitization, AI and all, they are definitely speeding up the processes. Thereby, time are available with people engaged in. Now, this being HR function, most of the HR functions in the present scenario are owned, and in fact, data input are done by individuals themselves.
Yes.
So work left behind with HR team is minimized. It is least one. We are living in the world of sustainability.
Yeah.
Now, how come HR themselves are aligning themselves and contributing their share in enhancing the sustainability in organization through their own acts and motivating others?
Yeah. It's a great question, and quite frankly, this does not just apply to HR. This actually is something that applies to teams across the board: operations team, logistics team, There's certain skills where this doesn't apply. But if you think about the evolution of the traditional HR model, it's actually always been evolving because it follows the evolution of people, technology, and business. So, typically HR used to be a follow function. Now it's a leading function. HR operations used to be embedded only within HR. Now there's more reliability on managers to be involved in the process and take action. And actually, some of the leading companies, such as DoorDash, I believe, have combined HR and technology teams. And I think Gartner did the same thing. So what's happening is the nature of the role is evolving, and we're meeting the moment where it is. And that, to your point, it's creating sustainability when it comes to some of the core functions, but it's also opening the opportunity for folks to do more evolved roles and roles that have to do maybe more with the reshaping of technology or the maintenance of the technology.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Of course. So here I'm going to go to the Q&A. Any questions, thoughts, follow-ups?
Salim, just to add on what Mr. Sushil mentioned, see this when we talk about the performance management using AI, it's obvious that AI track all the performance in terms of achieving the KPIs. So these are all quantifiable kind of things, like data driven.
Yeah.
So how do we, because when it comes to a leadership level or a top level kind of a thing, so the soft skills plays a very important role.
Correct.
Right? So be it in the leadership or collaboration, presentation, business acumen. So there are a lot of such things. So how do we capture, how do AI do a kind of an integrity check in those kind of aspects when it comes to the performance management?
Yeah. So I can tell you out of my experience, what's been really helpful is creating simple and robust frameworks. So I can tell you I've been through two big changes in performance management at Deloitte and Google. And what's been true there is that it's been less set of questions, more direct questions, working on better manager training and overall company training so that folks understand what giving, for example, a score of 5 means versus a score of 3, and being able to purely define what collaboration looks like, what best of class looks like, but then also using that holistically across the board in real time to alleviate for any biases in that, and also have a 360 review. So when we're talking about things like collaboration, we're able to get perspective not only from the manager of the employee, but potentially one of their peers, and they are a manager from one of their directs. So that way, any gaps in providing input on things like collaboration, presentation, etc., it's all captured there. So, shorter questions, robust way to answer those questions, training for managers and training for company, and also providing multiple points of view to offset any biases might show up or any gaps.
Yeah, thank you, Salam. I think that 360-degree kind of a review, that is really helpful.
Absolutely.
Good point. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, and yes, this is my LinkedIn. Please add me, connect with me. Happy to, connect more. And also, we will be posting this recording. So please review it, share with your network. I know I'll be posting it for my network. But I believe we're coming to time, right?
Yes, unfortunately we are, but Salem, what a great presentation, high values. And you know what I feel? That I didn't know anything about HR, and I feel like I'm recalibrated to 2025, what to expect. And also in my own ideas, my bias are being kind of cleaned up. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, and thank you all for taking the time. As I said, although we applied this within the context of HR, I hope today that you're leaving this talk being able to think about your work, the challenges that you're facing, and how can you better understand AI there. But thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for taking the time and giving me the space to share my knowledge with you.
Thank you, Salem, again. And we don't have enough time, so we're going to finish the presentation right now. But please go ahead. I'll give you a minute just to go in the chat if you haven't, and just pick up Salem LinkedIn. I can tell you he's very reliable, and he will answer as soon as he can. So that is also, a good representation of what HR should be.
Of course, and if you have any questions, or there's an opportunity for me to talk to your teams, or you want to ideate, please let me know. I'm open to networking and also sharing my knowledge beyond this meeting.
Awesome. Salem and everyone, best of luck for the end of this week, and happy weekend, everyone, and talk to you guys soon. I love the presentation. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.